In this video, we are going to be continuing our walkthrough series of handling custom styling in Mendix. So in the last video, we talked about just some basic styling principles, how to adjust your styling in the properties panel and also in the styling files in Mendix's app modules. And in this video, I want to just go a little bit more in depth and actually talk about how you can go from just using Mendix's default components to actually using your own custom CSS and completely overriding some of those default things, because it definitely is possible. And so this would be a video for a student who would like to use more than just Mendix's default styling and actually try and create more customized a more customized design that matches your Figma mockups. So in this video, we're going to try and just create a couple of components that more closely reflect the styling that's happening in this mockup right here. So we'll try and create like a really simple nav bar, and then also maybe this like little task card and try and make that in CSS. And I just want to hopefully give you guys some better CSS knowledge. Um, while it's not a prerequisite that you understand any CSS to watch this video, I definitely think having at least a basic understanding of how CSS works will be a really helpful background, because I will be using a lot of CSS in this video, and it'll hopefully make more sense if you've done a little bit already. So let's hop over to Mendix. So if you guys remember from the last video, this was where we kind of got to. We had made this phone view layout, and then we had styled this bottom navigation bar to be white using this custom nav bar class, which we applied to our nav bar. And then I walked through how to use some of these custom variables and change your colors and all that good stuff. So let's just continue from there, because really to add CSS styling, you can really do it all just inside of here if you want. So yeah, let's start by just finishing up styling this nav bar, because currently, if I hop over to the browser, you'll notice that when I hover over these things, they are still using Mendix's default like hovering capabilities. And also, not to mention, the default font is white, which we don't want. So we're going to need to change all that. So in order to do that, let's actually first, I want to show you guys where you can actually find the custom or the default styling, excuse me, that Mendix is using to style all of these things. Because Mendix is also relying on CSS. So if I click into, let me go to my layout. I believe it's here. Yeah. So you see this right here when I hover over it, it says simple menu bar. That is the name of the component that Mendix is using to style this. And so we can actually find this in Mendix's files on the back end. So I'll show you guys a little bit of how to manipulate things there. So if we go up to app up here, and then we click show app directory in Finder or Explorer if you're on a Windows, this will actually open up Mendix's file structure, which will allow us to find where the default styling files are. So if we actually click into theme source, let's see, theme source, where is it? Atlas Core, that's the name of it. So Atlas Core is Mendix's default styling library, and we want to do web styling. And it's pretty deep in here, so we need to go into core, widgets. Here we go. Okay, so inside of here, you'll notice that there's all sorts of different files. Here's our simple menu bar.css. So let's actually open this. You can open it with a text editor or notepad. I'm going to open it inside of a code editor, but you don't have to do that. So yeah, you can just ignore everything going on here. This is actually a different project, but this is the file that we want. So I'm just literally going to copy this entire file, and we are going to paste it. I'm going to close out of this for now. We're going to paste it inside of our navbar CSS file. And this will allow us to actually override some of the custom or some of the default styling that Mendix has with our own custom styling. So I'm going to paste. Okay. There we go. So now we have all of this inside of here, and you'll notice that there's this disclaimer that's just saying don't edit this, but that's why we copied it. So we're not editing the original. And you can actually get rid of this enclosing mixin tag. We're not going to need that. Which means we can also go down to the very bottom and get rid of one bracket. So that's just the two enclosing brackets. And that should actually allow us to start manipulating this stuff. Oh, so the theme couldn't be compiled. I've actually run into this issue before. The reason is because there's actually a couple variables in here that we need to define. Yeah, navigate. You can't really see it here, but let me close out of this and this. So we actually just need to define a need to remember the names of the files, but a couple of these variables don't actually exist yet inside of our custom variables. So we need to define those. I can't remember if it's navigation background. Let's see if we can find that. It's not going to even let me paste navigation. Okay, navigation background does not exist inside of our custom variables. So that should be a problem. I could have sworn we did this in the last video, but that's okay. Let's just do it again. So let's see, nav bar. That's what it wants, right? Well, let's actually, because I know that this one exists, because that's what we used before. So let's copy that and paste it right here. Okay, there must still be a couple that don't exist. Let's see. I think if I remember right, it was like one of these down here, navigation background. Hover. Yeah, so it doesn't look like any of these exist yet. So let's actually define these. So yeah, let's just go right here. Oh, so we do have a navigation color and a color hover and a color hover active. Let's just do that. Navigation. We just need to use variables that exist. That's why it's yelling at us. See if that fixes our issues. Looks like there might still be, okay, yeah. Well, this is annoying. Okay. Hopping over to here, does this give me navigation background does not exist. Where is it using navigation backgrounds? Sorry, once this is done, then we can continue with the video, but this is good. So you guys can see like if you run into the same issue. Navigation background. So we're also running into this here. So let's change this to nav bar background. Okay. Navigation border color. Wow, they just don't exist. Hang on. I don't remember it being this difficult last time. Okay, well, if this continues, I might just pause the video, but essentially all I'm doing is just trying to figure out which of these variables aren't existing because this is kind of an odd error. Once this is done, then I will resume the video and I'll show you guys how you can continue to or like edit your own custom styling. So, all right, guys, I think I fixed all the issues. So the issue was that it was referencing this navigation slash BG slash active and hover But they just hadn't been defined yet in this custom variables class, which I find kind of weird, but that's all right. Now the error went away. Now I can actually show you guys what I wanted to show you. Um, so inside of here, this might look really intimidating, but really all that's happening is that Mendix is assigning classes, and these classes have kind of a nested hierarchy. And so like each of these are like classes within a class. And really, like if we were to look at this closely, you would notice that it's using a lot of variables that exist inside of our custom variables class or custom variable file, excuse me. And so if we want to change, so let's rerun our app really quickly. And if I hop back over here, if we wanted to change one of these, I changed all these to white on accident. But if we want to change any of these, we can actually just go into, sorry, let me move this really fast so we don't have to go through there every time. If we want to change these colors, it's actually, there's a really cool trick that you can use inside your browser. If you right click and then click inspect, you can actually see that hierarchy that I was talking about inside of this file editor right here. And so if we were to just like look at this part of the screen right here, when I'm going through these, you can see those classes names. So this one's MX scroll container wrapper. And then if we keep on going down, there we go. MX menu bar item, MX name index 0, and then it just keeps on going in. And if you notice, these line up with these classes here. So like you remember the MX menu bar item, and then inside of that is this A tag, which is this right here. You see that A. So you can kind of see like there's a hierarchy to HTML and CSS that Mendix follows as well. That kind of allows you to pinpoint where styling is being overridden. And this can be really helpful for debugging or finding where you want to add styling. So let's actually go into our file now. You'll notice that when I click down here, there's some things that are updating in this window right here. When I click, it's actually adding a class. This is a CSS class right here, and it's adding this class active when I click on something, which means that, yeah, and up here it just added it there. So when I click between these, it's adding this class active, which means that if we want to change the colors when we click on something, we need to find where it's using this class active, because that's where it's toggling the active styling. So we can actually just go into here and figure out where that is. So it's kind of hard to find, but we're inside of this menu bar item. That's what these are. You see menu bar item right here in the browser, menu bar item. And then we are just looking for this A tag, but when it's active, there it is. So that means that the color, so color here just means text color. So the color and the background color are set by these two variables. The navigation color hover, oh, is actually controlling both of them. That's kind of weird. So let's actually make this the background color and this the color when we hover over it. Okay, let me make sure I'm not creating any errors. That's good, I'm not. So these are where we're actually styling the color and the background color. And this might look really confusing, but just remember we're looking for that active class, and that's where we found it, is right here. So what that means is if we change these variable colors, we will change the colors of the text when we hover over them. We also need to set the text just when it's not hovered over, which I believe will be, let's see, we need to look for a color, navigation color. That's what we want. Color here just always refers to text color. So we want to change the navigation color for the text. So let's do that first. Navigation color set to white. Let's make this like a gray color. So I'm going to just type in, there's actually some gray variables in here. So let's just try like gray light, maybe. And if we save and head back over here, you'll notice that now anything that's not active, so these ones, are gray, which is good. That's what our design looks like in our Figma. Now we just need to change the active colors, which I believe were uh, these. So let's actually change these to um, brand primary. So if you guys remember brand primary, those are just like the really basic like brand colors that we set up here. So brand primary is this blue that we're using. Um, yeah, so let's do that. Where were we? Can't even remember where we were at. We were in a little bit further down. Brand primary, and let's also set this one to brand primary. Um, so now what this means is when we're hovering over or the active class is toggled, our text should be that blue color. Let's see if that worked. And it did. What that means is when we click on any of these, they're changing to the blue color that we set here in Figma. You'll notice this already is looking a lot more like our Figma design for the bottom nav. So that's pretty cool. Let me close out so you guys can see better. Yeah, that's looking really good. That looks a ton like our Figma design, actually. Perfect. Okay, so I think that that will settle those issues. And you'll probably notice that like we did not need to copy all this in to do what we just did. We could have just gone into custom variables and changed it. But I wanted to show you guys that you can do this if you want to like change this styling completely or like feed it into ChatGPT and have them change or have it change some stuff for you. That's how you can do that, is you can just like feed this or you can copy the custom styling from Mendix's Atlas core library and put it into your own custom CSS file. And then um, once you're done with that, you can change it to your liking. Okay, so in the next part of this video, what I want to do is show you guys how to create your own like template building blocks, because you're actually able to create your own custom layouts and stuff. We probably won't get into that too much in this video, but like here we have this phone bottom bar layout. We can actually like create our own layouts and stuff. So like we could make this a little bit more customized if we wanted to. So I would highly recommend looking up how to do that if you'd like to learn more. That being said, though, it's really not too much different than building a page. Like you're using layout grids, you're using all the same building blocks you'd use for a page. But I just figured I would touch on that really briefly. And then now what I would like to do is create a building block that we could use in our app. Going back to this design right here, we're going to try and create this card, this task, and try and make the styling look kind of like this. So how do we go about that? Well, the first thing we can do, let's actually make a folder inside of our module, and let's just call it building blocks. And building blocks in Mendix are just like predefined styling that you can use across your app as to kind of make your design like to make your styling easier. So let's actually right click on this file that we just created and add a building block. So I'll show you guys what this is in a second, but let's call this task item. Task item. That sounds good. Okay, we just created this building block, and inside of here is where we can actually design this. So let's just pretend like we're designing this algebra equation set. I'll give you guys an idea of how to do it. So first thing we need to do is we're using all the same blocks that we use for a page. So if you guys look, there's kind of like 3 columns to this. There's like a checkbox column, a text column, and then like a due date column. So let's actually drag in a layout grid Let's make it a 4-4-4 maybe. Um, and then well, we might actually, you know what we need to do? We might also need to put this inside of a container. So let me actually undo that and put a container in first and then a layout grid inside of that. And I'll show you why in a second. Oh, actually, or yeah, that looks good. And then something else I would like to do. So if you look, like it's more like this is only taking up a small little chunk of the screen. This is taking up a bigger chunk, and then like this is a smaller one as well. So let's actually change like the width of each of these columns to reflect that. So um, let's see for phone. I don't know if we want that actually. Hang on. Yeah, so I think if you double click into this, so this is like editing the column. Let's make this for phone size 3. Maybe even like, yeah, we'll have to mess around with this a little bit, but let's try this one as a size 6. It's kind of like double the size. I don't know why it's not showing, but we'll try it. Another 3 again. Okay. Um, that should be fine. Okay, so now let's just drag in the components that we might need. So it looks like we'll need like some sort of checkbox. So let's see if we can find something like that. Checkbox, love it. And we probably don't need a label. You can barely see it, but there's our checkbox. Inside of here, let's add some text. So maybe we add like one text here. Oh, we might also need to put this inside of a layout grid to make them vertical. And let's drag this in here. And let's add a row below. And then one more below. And so this will just be like our three, because we kind of have three different things. We have the kind of the item title. So let's make this a slightly bigger thing. That might be too big. And then let's just call it algebra equation set. This is just kind of to show what the data might look like. And then these are just like the topic and then the assignment. So let's make this I think that's what it said, mathematics. And then let's add one more text right here. Let's call this problem stitches through 12. Love it. Okay. Just to build out like a really, really basic card. Um, yeah. And then this would be the due date. So let's actually drag in one more text. And let's just say due today. And we'll make this just slightly bigger. Maybe one more, actually. Okay, so really all we're doing is just, this is like data that you'll override once you like actually build this out, but I just want to like show you guys the process of like designing something. So if you look, this is kind of what it'll look like on the screen if we were to just render it as is right now. So it's pretty bad. I want to know why that isn't working. I want this to be bigger. Maybe that. And auto content. Huh. Okay. Well, that's not working, but that's okay. We'll fix it later. That's fine. Okay, cool. So we have this. So how do we actually apply like the styling to this? Because so far all I've really done is just made like some structural things. So I'll actually show you guys how to do that with CSS again. So let's go into this container and let's give it a class in CSS. And styling. And then inside of here, let's actually give this a, let's call it task. Okay, I wanted to capitalize it. That's fine. Task item class. So what this means is when we create this task item CSS class, it will apply to this entire container and everything inside of it. So if we were to go back up into our styling web folder, let's actually, you know what? Let's create another folder in here and just call it widgets, just following kind of Mendix's naming conventions. Oh, shoot. I forgot an S on that. Let me rename that. Rename to widgets. There we go. Okay, perfect. So widgets, and then inside of here, let's actually create a new CSS file, and we'll call this the task item. So really all we're doing here is we're just going to define like the styles that we want to use for our project, or for our building block here, I mean. So while we're here, let's actually move navbar into widgets as well, if I can. Okay, it's not going to let me for now, but ideally I would move this in here, but just for the sake of time, I won't. But what I would like to do in here now is take that class that we created. So what do we call it? Task item. I want to take this class and now add some custom properties to it. So we called it task item. And this is where we could actually define those properties. But one thing, actually, before I forget, we do need to import this new file that we created, this task item CSS, into our main folder. Otherwise, it will not work. So widgets, huh? That's not what I want. Hang on. There we go. Okay. I think that should work. No errors. That's good. Okay, and so now how do we go about designing this so that it looks more like what we want it to? So actually, there's a really cool little hack that I learned in Figma. If you click into something, so let's click into one of these right here, maybe. If you right click on what you want to copy the CSS for, and then you click copy paste as code, there's actually a CSS option. So if you guys missed that, all I did was copy paste, copy as code, CSS. Copy there. Now, if I go into here and I paste, so this isn't going to be exactly right, but I think it'll actually be pretty close. This is all of the different stuff that we might need for styling here. So let's just save and see what it looks like. Whoa, and you'll notice, look at that. Already it looks a ton more like what we want. Um, there's a couple of things that are pasted over that I don't want. This position absolute is not going to work in our project. We also probably don't want this fixed height and width, honestly. So you can just get rid of all of that. The only time you'd want fixed height and width is like if you really do just want something to never change dimensions when it resizes. But most of the time you do want it to, and in this case we do because tasks could be different sizes. But if we look at it now, it's looking much closer to what I'm hoping it'll look like. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's actually drop this building block into our project and see how it looks. So let's go into our home mobile page. And let's delete this button. We won't need that. Let's actually replace it with this task building block that we created. So if we right click, or I guess toolbox, there should be an option to add building blocks. There they are. And you'll notice that there is the one that we've created, this task item. Let's drop it in, see how it looks. Not too bad. It's a little wonky right now. There's also an error because this checkbox needs to be inside of a data container, but that is okay. I might actually pause the video and just configure this really fast so that we can use it and throw it inside of like a list view. And then we'll get back to the styling. All right, so all I did was, in order to get this working so that we can look at it, is I went into our domain model and just added like a really simple task entity with a isSelected Boolean attribute. And then inside of our page, I also generated overview pages for that so that we could add new tasks really quickly. And then inside of our mobile page, I put that inside of a list view so that we could kind of start having this kind of look to our app. So it could kind of show up in a list format. And so if we hop over to our app, you'll notice I just added one for now, but you'll notice that already it's starting to take the shape of this format right here, which is pretty cool. The fonts match, the kind of like the border radius and the colors and the shadow match pretty well. But there's still a couple pretty big problems. And I'm going to touch on those really quickly. So the first one is you'll notice that the spacing's still kind of weird. Like this is hugging like the very top of the box. Same with this. So how do we get things centered? And this is something that has come up a lot, and I want to just like touch on really fast. So let's actually go into our let's see, where would this be? Let's first try inside of our task item. There's actually some really nifty ways that you can do this, but I'll show you guys kind of a really common way that you'll see in a lot of website applications. Is we can use a CSS property that's called flex. So display flex will just essentially tell our app that like we want to use kind of like a flexible layout option. And then inside of that, we can start telling Mendix how to align things. So if we say align items center and justify content center, I'll have to test this, but I believe what that'll do, oh, that might not have worked. Yeah, I don't think that worked. But what that does do is like inside of that next direct child container, it will start like moving things to be centered. So let's actually try it inside of this column and see if that works. So let's actually just write a new class and call it center. Just want to show you guys different like CSS principles you can use here. And let's just copy this. Into, oh, shoot. Okay, cool. Let's actually move the formatting on that. Okay. So now we have this center class that should center anything that we add it to. So if we add the center class here, let's see if it works. Boom, look at that. You see how the checkbox just moved to the center of this column? Let's try it with this here too. Boom, due today. Let's try it here too. I'm not sure how it'll look on this one, but it's worth a shot. Yeah, on this entire layout grid center. Oh, see, like that's probably not what we want. So the reason that happened is because Flex automatically lays things out in a row. And so if there's multiple items, it'll make it in a row. So in order to change that, you'd actually have to add um, you have to actually add a flex direction and say it's a column. And then now that should work. Yeah, there we go. So I don't know if that's exactly what we want, but let's give it a shot. So I actually also don't know if this will update automatically. We might actually have to recreate it, which is a little annoying. But now if we drag it in and let's see, we need to configure that checkbox. We need to just say that we're using the is selected attribute. Okay. Now if I save and rerun, let's take a look at how the app looks now. Yeah, that's a little bit better. I think I'll get rid of the centered thing on there because that looks pretty bad. So let me actually get rid of that. Which means we probably don't need that either. And then inside of here, let's go into here. No longer want the center class on this. So all I'm doing is just getting rid of that styling that we applied before. And now let's get rid of the class here as well. And now if we rerun, let's see if that will fix our problems. Yeah, that's much better. Perfect. Okay. So that kind of fixed like our spacing issues, but you'll notice that there's still a couple pretty big issues. One is that the padding on this, like it's pretty tight. So let's actually add a padding and I'll show you guys what that is. Padding is just like inner spacing. So you could do this in one of two ways. Mendix actually has like built in, like if you wanted to, you could just go into here and you'll see that there's a margin and padding. So if I wanted to, I think I could just go like this and that would work just fine. You could also apply padding like this inside of your CSS. And let's just say you want to add 20 pixels of padding on all sides. If you wanted to just add it on one side, you could do like padding hyphen left, padding hyphen right. And then they also have top and bottom. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. Let me undo the padding that we just added here because I would rather use trying to show you guys some CSS stuff first. So now you'll notice as soon as we did that, this just updated and it looks much better. It has a lot more room to breathe. Let's make this font slightly smaller, but I do think that this is a pretty good start. So if we just make this into heading 5, maybe. Let me save. Will that auto update here? No, it won't. I didn't think it would, but wanted to check. So let's make this 5 as well. And we'll need to rerun. Okay, still don't love that, but I think for the sake of this video, it's not too bad. It's just a pretty narrow phone screen, so I think that'll do the trick. So the last thing I want to show you guys how to do is let's just say, so we've kind of showed you guys 3 different things. Let's just say we wanted to like override Mendix's styling completely. Like for example, on this checkbox, because if you look like this checkbox here is much bigger. How do we go about doing that? So let's do that really fast and then we'll end the video. Um, oh, one last thing I also want to add, just a fun fact. You'll notice that there's this line that's going to divide everything. If you just want to get rid of that line in a list view, you can actually just go into, let's see, no styling. That's what we want. If we just get rid of all the styling on the list view, I believe that that'll just get rid of the, yeah, there we go. So now, um, you'll notice that like all the styling is gone and we can just like style it the way that we would like to. So that's kind of nice. Yeah. I don't know if you guys would want like margin on this side, but margin is just spacing on the outer side of this. So if you wanted to, you could go into here and you could just add margin. Let's just add it on the left and the right, maybe. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, just a little bit on the sides. That looks pretty good. And then honestly, we might just want margin on all sides though. And so in order to do that, you can actually just say margin 20 pixels. There we go. So now it's kind of spaced out on the top as well. Okay, let's take a look at this text box. And then honestly, after that, I think we're actually doing pretty well at like replicating this look in our app. So let's see. Let me also actually, I want to create one more. I made this really simple like data view just to create tasks. So yeah, let's do that. Let's create one more just like that. So now we can see them back to back. This is kind of the look of our app so far. Um, let's actually, let's see. I don't love how much spacing is right here either. So if you wanted to, you can also like specify, you can override things like this. There's kind of all sorts of different ways to do CSS, but I'm trying to show you guys a whole bunch of different ways. This is just like setting that. Yeah, you'll notice that when I did that, it overrode the 20 pixels that was happening on the top and the bottom. So now they're slightly closer on those sides, which I think looks a little bit better. Okay, let's do this checkbox. Let's make it look a little bit more like this. So in order to do that, and once again, like if you guys don't know any of these commands, that's totally fine. I would highly recommend using ChatGPT or another chatbot that you like to help you generate these styles because they're really good at that. You can also copy them directly from Figma sometimes. Like, I don't know, this may not work super well with the checkbox, but for a lot of things, you can just copy the CSS straight from here. Okay, so for this checkbox, let's actually create a new styling folder again, new styling file, I mean. Let's call it checkbox. Okay, and inside of here, let's create, we'll actually need to do the same thing we did before, where we need to copy the original checkbox styling. So in order to do that, we just go to Show App and Finder, and then we're going to go into Theme Source, Atlas Core, Web, I believe, for widgets. It's pretty far in here. Should be like a, yeah, there we go, checkbox. Let's copy this. Just gonna load up for a second. Okay, and once again, you do not need to know what any of this is doing. We're literally just copying this so that we can override just a couple little things to make it look better for us. Okay. And let's paste it here. Okay. Let's get rid of this mix-in thing because that might not allow us to use the styling. Now if we save, hopefully there's no errors. No errors. Perfect. Okay. And then the last thing we need to do is just import this into our main.css file. Oh, actually there was an error there. Forgot a semicolon. And let's import it there. That way we can use it. Okay. This is looking good now. So let's add a custom class to this, and maybe just call it custom checkbox. I don't know if we'll end up needing this. We may not, but just while I'm thinking of it right now, we can add it. And then we can close out of that. Let's go into here. Okay, so this is all of the styling for the checkbox itself. So in order to override it, we move this again. Let's actually just take a look in the browser at what CSS is happening already. So I just right-clicked and I'm inspecting this checkbox itself. So you'll see there it is. And these are down here are the CSS classes that it's using. So these are all of its basic classes, but I want to see, okay, width and height, input type checkbox. So this is where the width and the height are being set inside of that. So let's see if we can find, oh yeah, input type checkbox. So this is the class essentially, or the selector that's saying where the width and height are being set. Let's actually just make it way bigger. So let's make this 30. Oh, let's make this 32 pixels instead of 16. And let's just take a look at how this looks. Whoa, look at that, way bigger. Nice. So you can see we overrode those styling things. Once again, we're going to need to, let's see, something you can do to make it circular. Maybe we do that next. Is there's an attribute called border radius. And border radius just means like how curvy is something. And so you can actually just set it to like a really high number and that'll make it circular. Probably don't need it that big, but I just am in the habit of doing that. See if that worked. Oh, that did not work. I don't know if it's actually loaded yet. Let me just make sure that this is updating. I'll just give it a second. Let's see. Just kind of took a second. It's really taking a second. There we go. Okay, so that did not work. Let's find out why. So we have this input type checkbox. So these are all the different attributes that are being applied to it. Let's just see if we can figure out why that isn't working. Interesting. Um, I'm sure it's just something that's overriding it. This is kind of the hard part about CSS is trying to figure out like what's happening where. Um, looks like MH checkbox type checkbox. Yeah, let's try it here because this says the checkbox right here. So maybe we try it here. So let's actually just copy. We'll just cut because it's not working. So really all I'm doing is trying to show you guys like different ways you can achieve CSS styling. It's kind of interesting that that isn't working because usually that should work just fine. Hmm. Ah, interesting. You'll notice how this is circular, but the actual checkbox itself is not. So maybe we need border radius here. Okay, well, let me pause the recording and I'll let you guys know what the issue was once I find it. All right, guys, I think I figured out the issue. So in order to fix this particular issue, the problem was that I needed to add like a tag to say like override this property. And so the syntax for that is to put an exclamation point and then important. And so inside of this right here, let me actually just try it. Border radius 999. But yeah, that did seem to be the issue. It was just that some other styling was overriding somewhere in our application. There was another styling that was overriding things. And that's why it's kind of tricky sometimes. Like overriding Mendix's defaults can be a little tedious and cumbersome, but it is possible. And with a little bit of practice, it isn't too bad. Okay, yeah, see, so you need that important tag. So if I add important here, then it'll work. Um, so I might have been putting it the wrong one. Important. There we go. Okay, so it just had to be down here. All right. So that was a lot just to get things like figured out, right? Well, let's actually now add some styling for or try and get this checkbox to be centered. Because after we do that, I think we're actually almost pretty much good with this checkbox. And like I said, a lot of this is just messing with it, but let's actually use our same thing that we did before, where we're going to use a flexible display, and then we're going to try and center it here. And let's just see if that works. I have a feeling it won't on the first try, but it's worth trying. Um, yeah, once again, you can see that the styling did not seem to like that. Um, let's see, let's just make sure that that's actually being applied. So we're just inspecting. I'm not seeing it. Let's type checked. Interesting. Um, yeah, as you can see, it just sometimes is pretty finicky. Like you really do just have to kind of click through a lot of this to try and figure out what's going on. Yeah, so there it is. That's our interesting. Yeah, my guess is once again, there's just something that's overriding it. And unfortunately, that's just how it goes sometimes. Yeah, I don't want this video to go too much longer. This is definitely taking more time than I thought it would. Um, but I hope you guys can kind of see the process that I'm going through. Obviously, like with any of these things, you can definitely come talk to the TAs because this is like definitely more advanced styling that requires you to like go through some of these different things. Um, a lot of this is just hard to know exactly like what's going wrong. Like here, I'm just looking through. Oh, we can at least start with this. Let's make this check mark a little bit bigger. I'm just doubling the size of it. Does that work at least? There we go. Okay, so that is the check box. That is the check mark, so that's good. We're to get rid of that. I'm just trying a couple different things to tell you guys. Uh, no. Oh wow, that's definitely not what we wanted. Let's undo that. Okay, so it appears as though the issue is just that there is something that is overriding the centering. So if we were to put something else you can do in the browser, which is kind of cool, is you can actually add CSS styles here. So if we just go display flex, okay, you'll notice that when we put it inside of this MH checkbox input type checkbox, that does seem to move the checkbox. What's interesting about that is that I don't Not entirely sure why that would be working. MH checkbox. Let's see. And that's the other thing. When you reload the page, it sometimes does erase anything that you've done in here. So you just need to be aware of that. There's checkbox, input type checkbox. I'm just gonna add those three attributes that we've used before to see if that will fix our dilemma. Ah, and it did. Okay, so all I did to figure that out, so I looked in here and you see how in CSS it actually has like this selector, I guess you could call it. It's like the class, and then inside of that is this like input. So you can actually just copy this to like apply styling at that level of the HTML. And so in this case, all I did was I just changed this to MH checkbox, input type checkbox to match this. And then now you're seeing that these stylings were applied. So now it's much more centered. If I wanted to make this move up a little bit, I think I can actually just add a margin to the bottom of it or a padding. So let's try it. Padding bottom 2 pixels. Yeah, I think that did work. Oh, margin bottom. Okay. Let's try adding it to this right here. So now this is inside of here. Ah, so we just need to find this selector now, this input checkbox checked after, which I believe is just this. This is the checkbox. So if I were to just add a margin to the bottom of this, which we can do by doing margin hyphen bottom, and then 10 pixels there. That might be too much, but I'm just going to try it. Yeah, you'll notice suddenly this looks pretty much centered. Looks pretty good. And now if we compare it, might be a little too big, but you guys get the idea. I mean, that looks much more like this than when we started. And so hopefully I covered a lot of concepts in this video, and hopefully it wasn't super confusing. A lot of this requires a little bit of knowledge of CSS already. And so if you guys are like feeling over your heads with any of this, I would highly recommend just trying to look up basic CSS commands using like ChatGPT to help you come up with some of this stuff to be like, hey, ChatGPT, based on this file, can you refactor it so that there's a little bit more space between the checkbox and the bottom of the circle? And ChatGPT usually does a pretty good job, and you can achieve styling pretty well doing that. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful and that you guys were able to kind of see like different ways that you can add CSS into your app to override Mendix's custom styling and make your apps look a lot more like what your Figma designs look like. So yeah, good luck with trying to achieve that. And of course, stop by TA hours if you run into any issues.